May I have your attention?
Shut up and sit down.
We're going to ask that everyone would please move toward your seats. I know this is a wonderful evening, but you're entirely too friendly for a New England crowd. We could all move toward our seats. We'd appreciate it so we can begin to get our program going. Good evening, and welcome to you all. My name is the Reverend Ray Hammond, and I'm proud to introduce the other co-chairs of tonight's event, Sandy Edgerly and Robert Beal. Sandy, would you begin for us tonight?
Thank you so much, Ray. I am delighted to welcome everyone here this evening for the Boston Foundation's 100th Anniversary Gala Dinner. I was so proud to serve as a co-chair of the host committee for this gala with Robert and Ray. These two were amazing to work with, and I'd like to thank them both, as well as the 28 other amazing people who served on the host committee for this evening's event. You'll see their names on the screen during dinner, and they're also listed in your program. They were fantastic. Most of all, I want to thank all of you, the businesses, the colleges, the hospitals, the philanthropists, the nonprofit organizations, and so many others who responded to our invitation to join us in tonight's celebration. Our efforts were successful beyond our highest expectations. Robert, would you like to share with everyone what we were able to raise tonight?
Sandy, thank you, and I'd love to, and I'm delighted to let all of you know that at tonight's gala, we've raised $1 million. I'll have a little remark later. And the good news is that the majority of the funds raised tonight will go right back into the community through the Community Grant Making and Permanent Fund for Boston, the pool of resources that the Boston Foundation relies on to respond to the most pressing issue our city faces every year. Our other co-chair, Ray Hammond, knows something about the Boston Foundation because he only served as the chair of the Boston Foundation for 6 years. And it's been a pleasure to work with and be involved with the Boston Foundation and to thank Paul Grogan, Mary Jo Meisner, and the whole staff for everything that they have done to make this the most important fund in helping make Boston and Greater Boston a better city. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Reverend Hammond.
Thank you, Robert. It was my privilege and honor to serve as the Foundation's board chair. And in that position, I learned so much about the important work of the Foundation in this community. Its work in education, its work in health, its work in jobs and economic development, in housing, arts, and culture. Knowing what I know, I am absolutely thrilled that the funds we raise tonight will benefit both our current grant making and the Permanent Fund for Boston. That Permanent Fund for Boston provides the resources that are needed to support Boston's incredible and innovative nonprofit sector. Now, if you care, not just about Boston's present, but about Boston's future, we want you to stay tuned for some exciting news about a special campaign for that all-important endowment fund, the Permanent Fund, and that will come later in the program. But now, let me introduce to you tonight's Master of Ceremonies, founder and CEO of the amazing nonprofit organization called Year Up, my friend, Gerald Chertavian.
Thank you, Ray, and good evening to you all. I am honored to play the role of MC this evening to celebrate the Boston Foundation's 100th birthday. How good is that? When I think about my own relationship with the foundation, I think about that ancient Indian tale about three blindfold men who went up to touch an elephant to learn what it was like. One touched the tusk of the elephant, one touched the trunk, and the third ran his hand on the great side of the elephant on its skin. When they compared notes, they realized they were in total disagreement. Well, when I first experienced the Boston Foundation, I came as a grant seeker. 15 years ago, I had an idea of launching a nonprofit organization, came to the foundation, and they received and provided one of our first grants. And so I thought of them thus as a grant-making organization. Then, a short while later, I learned that our family could actually conduct our own personal philanthropy through a donor-advised fund at the foundation. And so we became part of the foundation under that auspice of actually helping us as a family to make donations and make grants to organizations in this community. So now I was thinking of the foundation as both a grant maker as well as a partner in philanthropy. And finally, I was honored to be on the board of the foundation for 5 years, and that's where I really started to learn about that third leg of the stool for the foundation, is their incredibly powerful and impactful role in civic leadership and policy work, especially as it relates to providing greater opportunity and access for those in our community. So now my blindfold was off. I saw the foundation in its entirety, and I really liked what I saw. Now, you know the foundation is 100 years old this year. What you may not know is that it was the brainchild of a banker named Charles E. Rogerson. He was the president of the Boston Safe Deposit and Trust Company. His son, Charles M. Rogerson, was a young attorney who drew up the papers to create the foundation and served as its director for more than 30 years. In 1980, additional banks joined the foundation as its trustees, and in the late 1990s, all of the trustee banks handed over control of the foundation to its own independently elected board of directors and allowed them to also invest and manage their own funds. I'd like now to introduce the founding sponsors of tonight's event. Joni Jackstimer of BNY Mellon, which represents, thank you, Joni. BNY Mellon represents the founding bank, Boston Safe Deposit and Trust Company. Second is Bob Gallery, Bank of America. Excuse me, Kerry Sullivan of Bank of America. I think we won with that one, Kerry. Thank you very much. And finally, Allison Quirk of State Street. Representing the other former trustee banks for the foundation. Folks?
They would have never given me that job if they knew what a klutz I am. Should have worn my sneakers. Good evening, everyone. My name is Joni Jackstimer, and I am absolutely delighted to be here this evening representing BNY Mellon. We are very proud to be a founding sponsor of the Boston Foundation's 100th anniversary gala. But let me first explain the birthday cake, because I know you want to know. BNY Mellon is proud to be representing the founding trustee bank of the Boston Foundation, as Gerald mentioned, Boston Safe Deposit and Trust Company, which literally was there at the beginning for the Boston Foundation. Thank you. And my cake is decorated with the word responding, which represents the early years of the foundation. From 1915 to 1959, the Boston Foundation responded to the needs of people in Boston during 2 world wars, the Spanish flu pandemic, the Great Depression, the scourge of polio, and numerous other challenges. And then, thanks to the generosity of a major donor to the foundation in 1917, $4 million from a man named James Longley, the Boston Foundation was the first community foundation in America with the capacity to make grants. And those grants went to all of the hospitals in Boston, the settlement houses, and important social change organizations such as the Women's Educational and Industrial Union and Boston's chapter of the NAACP. So now, let's see who's presenting the next birthday cake.
So I'm not Bob Gallery, but I'm thrilled to be here. I'm Carrie Sullivan, and I'm very excited to be here at tonight's gala. On behalf of Bank of America, we are another sponsor of tonight's event, and I'm representing not only Bank of America, but all the other trustee banks that serve the Boston Foundation and its many donors from the early 1980s up through the late 1990s. My birthday cake is decorated with the word seeding, which stands for an exciting period in the Boston Foundation's history. In 1959, a man named Albert Stone left close to $20 million in his will to the Boston Foundation, and that gift doubled their assets overnight and transformed its entire approach to philanthropy. Under the leadership of Bill Bender, Fred Glimp, Gino Bellotti, and Anna Faith Jones, the Boston Foundation focused on seeding innovation in Boston by providing critical and early funding to more than 100 great ideas and new nonprofit organizations. In your program, you'll find the entire list of the organizations for which the Boston Foundation has provided seed funding. So with that, who is presenting the third cake?
I just had this terrible thought that I was going to dump that cake right on your lap. I couldn't get it quite to the front of the stage, so here I am. Good evening. My name is Allison Quirk, and I'm here representing all of the employees of State Street Corporation that live and work in the city of Boston, and extend our gratitude to the Boston Foundation for all of the value that they've added to the city that we love. State Street served as trustee bank of the Boston Foundation from the early 1980s to the late 1990s, when the foundation actually became its own corporation. My cake is decorated with the word changing, and it stands for the remarkable transformation that has happened at the Boston Foundation under the leadership of Paul Grogan. Paul has been with the foundation for 14 years, and when he arrived, it was a highly respected grant maker known well to the nonprofit community. But Paul was responsible for changing the game by turning the foundation into a provider of information, acting as a convener and a civic leader. Since then, the Boston Foundation has had profound effect on public education, community colleges, healthcare, and housing, expanded resources for cultural facilities, and many other aspects of our community lives. We will enjoy slices of these cakes for dessert tonight. It's my favorite dessert, birthday cake. And when we do, let's reflect on the remarkable history of both the foundation and the city. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Dick DeWolf, Chairman of the Board of Manulife John Hancock.
All Grogan asked me was, can you hold your liquor? This is called a Methuselah. And I guess the significance, other than the celebratory nature of this, is to show that the foundation is still quite young, since Methuselah lived to 969 years old. Anyway, you can see that I am not John Fish, who is in your program. John is on a mission that I thought was pretty inventive on the part of the staff here. He's on his way to the West Coast, and he is bearing a bunch of baby gifts that the development staff at TBF gave him to visit the Zuckerbergs. Those donor-advised funds, you gotta love them. Anyway, I'm here really to represent the business community and to offer thanks. You know, it was just 10 or 15 years ago, while I was serving on the board of TBF, that we truly were lamenting the shift in the business community and worried to death about leadership in the business community, worried about funding from the business community, wondering if Boston would continue to be a prestigious center of business activity. And clearly, it's come back stronger than ever. So with great thanks to the 50 corporate sponsors that we had here, and to the hundreds of you out there in business who support the Civic Leadership Fund, we give you tremendous thanks and appreciation. And we hope that you all understand and will continue to tell every other peer the significance of having a healthy city in which to operate our businesses. It is symbiotic. The better we are, the better we do. Anyway, my real purpose is to offer a toast this evening. But before I ask you to raise your glasses, I won't ask you to stand because that'll probably cause all kinds of chaos here. It is really important to recognize that while 100 years has gone by, the thousands and thousands of hours that have been spent by the various leadership teams that have operated the Boston Foundation in those 100 years. Nothing really, you can have the greatest products in the world, you can have the greatest service in the world, you can have the greatest technology in the world, but nothing really happens unless you have the best people in the world. And what the Boston Foundation has done culturally is continue to attract the very best and brightest people to lead the activities that have produced so many benefits for our city and Massachusetts as a whole. So I hope that as you're thinking about this toast, you're also thinking about all of those people through this history who have meant so much to our community. So with that, if you would raise your glasses to one great foundation in one great city, 100 years, and 100 more to the Boston Foundation. Cheers. Thank you all. And now it gives me great, this is the first time I've ever had an opportunity to do a twofer. I'm going to introduce both the governor and the mayor. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Hey everybody, this is Governor Charlie Baker. I'm really sorry I can't be with you tonight. Massachusetts is a big place, and tonight, unfortunately, I need to be somewhere else. But I did want to take a minute to pay my respects to the Boston Foundation on its centennial, and I especially want to congratulate Michael Keating and the rest of the folks on the board, and Paul Grogan and his terrific management team and staff for the wonderful work you do here in Boston. More than any other organization over the course of your long and storied history, you have been part of positive change over and over and over throughout your history. And I must say that I'm thrilled to be on your team and on your side as we work very hard to bring more charter schools and better educational opportunities to all the kids here in the Commonwealth, and especially the kids here in the city of Boston. It's great that you're celebrating your 100th anniversary, but it's no surprise. You've been relevant, important, and a game changer for so many people for so many years. Congratulations, and I hope you have a great night.
Good evening, I'm Mayor Marty Walsh, and I'm sorry that I cannot join you tonight, but I want to extend my deepest congratulations to Paul Grogan and the Boston Foundation on your 100th anniversary. I was happy to join all of you last February when you released your history book, celebrating the tremendous work the Boston Foundation has done over the last century. As a state representative and now as mayor, I've seen that great impact you've had on our city. You've been a leader and supporter on so many different issues, from education to housing to public safety. You've given us useful data on how we can make our city and Commonwealth the best it can be. You've built programs, places, and organizations. You've supported generations of innovators and change makers. I'm proud to further this great partnership in my role as mayor as we work to build more pathways to success for all residents. Like I've said before, when I see great things happening in Boston, I know that the Boston Foundation is usually there and has played a role in it. The city is proud to be your partner, and we look forward to a bright future of working together to advance this special city we all love so much.
Mindful of the fact that we are here tonight and that we are part of many religious traditions, and in some cases, no tradition, we're going to ask that you would take your neighbor's hand as we offer a brief word of thanks and blessing. And those who will, if you would just bow your heads. Dear God, to our utter amazement, it's a century later and we are still here. Despite 2 wars to end all wars, despite a depression so deep and global that we called it great, still here despite movements that have upended our society and begun to redress injustice when it comes to race and gender and disability and sexual identity. Despite technologies that thrill us even as they may threaten our very existence. Still here, despite climate changes we caused and drag our feet on addressing. Still here, with all our terrible imperfections and amazing possibilities. A century later, we are still here, blessed to be alive, joining our hands and giving thanks, praying on behalf of our region, our country, and our world, and celebrating an extraordinary institution, the Boston Foundation. And we've got a feeling that tonight's going to be a good night. It's a good night to thank you for that vision, hard work, and commitment to justice that brought this foundation into being and that guide it even today. A good night to celebrate an occasion where people can look back and feel inspiration to go forward in our civic and global life. A place where poor and rich, young and old, women and men of every nation and race and tongue can find healing and hope. It's a good night to say thank you to a hardworking board and inspired leadership, a staff second to none, and a family of donors and grantees who give sacrificially and generously of their time, their talent, and their treasure. It's a good night to pray for those in Beirut and Paris and Bamako and northern Cameroon who have felt, even in greater measure, the trauma we endured during a Boston Marathon not long ago. And a good night to ask that the fears of terror and tears of suffering might come to an end, and that the generations following may finally know peace that day when all swords will be beaten into plowshares, when justice shall roll down like a mighty stream, and when we, your children, will study war no more. It's a good night. And we're having a wonderful time, but in this place we commit ourselves to pray for and work for the heartbroken, the homeless, and the hungry in our city and around your world. And it is your world, creator, sustainer, liberator, and lover of our souls. And we are grateful to be in it. And because we are grateful, and because tonight is a good night, together we say, Amen.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. My name is Mary Jo Meissner. I'm Vice President for Communications and... Thank you, Gary. Communications and Public Affairs at the Boston Foundation. And on behalf of all my colleagues at the Boston Foundation, I too want to welcome you here this evening to our 100th birthday party. Thank you for coming. So, more than a dozen years ago, Hubie Jones went to Chicago with a group of leaders from Boston and heard that city's renowned children's choir perform. He was so inspired that, as he has done so many other times in his remarkable career, he took that idea, he gave it life, and he founded the Boston Children's Chorus. Today, the chorus serves as a vehicle for bringing 450 youngsters from 100 urban and suburban neighborhoods in Boston area together to harness the power of music, unite Boston's diverse communities, and spark social change. In 2003, Hubie came to the Boston Foundation with that idea. He needed funding to make it a reality. So the foundation made the very first grant to the Boston Children's Chorus and has been funding it ever since. And when we were looking for the perfect performers for our 100th anniversary celebration, there was never any question that it would be the Children's Chorus. Tonight, under the artistic direction of the wonderful Anthony Teresa King, we give you the Boston Children's Chorus.
sound that brings us all together. There is a way that we can change. One by one we will join as you hear our voice. We sing the hope of tomorrow. Our time, this is our call.
These cobbled streets and historic facades once witnessed the dawn of the great American experiment. Rooted in revolution and nourished by independent, innovative thinkers from around the world, Boston continues to reimagine itself. The Boston Foundation helps chart that course, uniting compassionate individuals into a mighty force for profound change. Together with our network of partners, we seek to nurture the talent of every child in Boston.
You think it's the one after C? I disagree because look.
To stimulate their minds and watch them develop the skills that will carry them into adulthood.
Black beans are done, guys. Black beans on the stove. The anatomy of that is almost the same as veal. They're both.
We strive to stand by Bostonians through every chapter of their lives. Investing in programs today to create better jobs and brighter lives tomorrow.
Thank you all for being here. It's a great crowd, and we're going to have an important discussion about a crucial topic.
The Boston Foundation fosters strong civic leadership by bringing experts and stakeholders together, helping to move important ideas forward. It's about more than just economic opportunity. A strong city is comprised of healthy individuals.
How are you? I'm good. How are you today?
I'm good. Sort of looking back both at your weight and how your diabetes has been managed, we know that you've been doing really well.
Our commitment to wellness, to personalized, hands-on healthcare and preventive medicine spans generations. Behind the statistics of urban renaissance are people, building communities, raising families, going to school, going to work. The Boston Foundation is proud to bring together leaders and resources devoted to transforming entire neighborhoods into robust civic hubs that are diverse, vibrant, and safe. And when the work of the day is done, we can reflect on a city rich in culture and opportunity, where diverse voices unite in harmony and we all thrive. Let's stand up together with our donors and our many partners and say, resoundingly, this is our city.
Well, you know, I've done just enough public speaking to know when you've been put in a really bad spot in the program. What we should probably do is bring the children's chorus back out here to do a couple more numbers. No, wait a minute. Thank you for being here tonight. And there's just been a great feeling in the room. And it's very, very gratifying for us to have lured you all here for tonight. In fact, just looking at this crowd and who's in it, it reminds me of a story from Boston politics. Back in 1932, the two leading Democratic contenders for the presidential nomination were Al Smith, the governor of New York, who had run also in 1928, and of course Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And James Michael Curley, in an absolutely stunning move, endorsed Roosevelt very early in the process. And in this very Catholic city, that was a highly unpopular thing to do. But of course, that horse came in for Mayor Curley, and one of the paybacks that he got from the new president was a ticker tape parade in an open car with the two of them together. And that happened, and they were speeding through the streets of Boston, actually going quite fast, and Curley complained to the president, said, "Mr. President, we're going so fast, I'm not sure the people can see." And Roosevelt said, "Well, they all know who I am." And Curley said, "Well, that may be, Mr. President. I want to make sure they see who you're with." And we're very glad to be seen with all of you this evening. This is, yes, this is a birthday for the Boston Foundation, but we really think of it as a larger celebration of philanthropy and the nonprofit community and all that has been accomplished by those forces in our city. You know, when you think about the identity of Boston and the institutions, the iconic institutions that give the city its character and its distinctiveness, they are things like our major research universities, our splendid colleges, our teaching hospitals, our unmatched cultural assets, and of course, a little more below the radar screen, the amazing social change nonprofits that have done so much to make this a fairer, juster city. All of those every one of those institutions, well, they have some things in common. They're all nonprofits, but also they depend on philanthropy to realize their full potential. There isn't one of these institutions that would be anything what they are without the very robust and generous philanthropy that comes their way. So in a way, I don't think there's another city that could be described that way. So another way to put it is that we have as big a stake in not only the magnitude of philanthropy, but the effectiveness of it, perhaps than any place we know. So philanthropy itself is a fitting subject for us to analyze, debate, talk about, particularly in this community because it is so important. And we've tried to do a little of that ourselves in the context of this centennial. Take a searching look at the history of the foundation and try to decide what's been most important about it. Not just to know that, but obviously as a guide to the future as we consider the challenges ahead. And as we have talked about, and we're going to talk about a little bit more before the evening is over, the Boston Foundation has this astonishing record of having provided startup or seed capital to an amazing number of organizations that grew up to be somebody and across many different fields in this town. And why did that happen? Long before the term venture philanthropy was invented, the staff at the Boston Foundation were making informed bets on ideas, on people, and nascent organizations. And a lot of those bets came in with great consequences, positive consequences for the city. I think there were two things that worked there. One is, for some reason, it got into the DNA of the foundation at an early point, long before I or the current staff got there. They had a receptivity to new ideas. They understood that Boston is an innovative place, and we innovate in law, in medicine, in business, in technology, in politics, but we also innovate in the social sector. They understood that. So unlike most philanthropy, certainly at that time, that was risk-averse and wished to invest only in established institutions, the Boston Foundation was making those bets. The second piece is they had flexible capital, as was mentioned earlier, thanks initially to a mill owner named James Longley, who left his entire $4 million estate to the foundation in 1916 or 17. Ever since then, the Boston Foundation has had the flexible capital that it could deploy to meet a challenge that couldn't have been imagined long before. I think these are two attributes, not just of the Boston Foundation, but of our town that we really have to look after. When will we not need a receptivity to new ideas? Will there be a time when we won't need flexible capital in both the private and the nonprofit sectors? I don't think those times will ever come. And in terms of the capital, we are doing, I think, some yeoman's work at the foundation. Over the life of the Boston Foundation, we have provided, with our donors, in partnership with our donors, $1.6 billion to Boston area nonprofits. But I hope you won't think me excessively proud to mention that $1 billion of that $1.6 billion has been in the last 10 years. So the curve is headed in the right direction. But that is all about the people in this room. The same people who made this dinner possible have helped the foundation grow its impact very, very significantly. Well, let's talk for a second about the city that this is all occurring in. As many of my friends out there know, I came to Boston for the first time in 1975 as a very junior assistant to Mayor Kevin White. And if anyone is really upset with the course that my career has taken, you can blame Ira Jackson, who's here tonight, because he hired me. If you came to Boston in the mid-'80s or later, it would be very difficult for you to imagine how much trouble this city was in 1975. We were hemorrhaging jobs and people to the suburbs. 100,000 people departed in a mere decade. What are now some very pricey neighborhoods were teetering on the verge of oblivion, with spreading abandonment, weed-filled empty lots, carpets of broken glass on the sidewalks and the streets. And there was a pervasive pessimism about the future not only of Boston, but of the other great cities of that time. And I think one emblem of that pessimism is that Kevin White and Jim Rouse, the legendary developer, failed to raise initially any local financing for the Faneuil Hall Marketplace project. It was viewed as quixotic, charitably, by the business community. Fortunately, they got the money elsewhere, and the rest is history. But that's just how pessimistic people were about this great city. I think through that, another thing to say about the Boston Foundation of that time is, despite the evidence to the contrary, despite this pervasive pessimism, the Boston Foundation was optimistic about the future, and that's why the foundation continued to make the bets that it did. And now, of course, we have lived to see this incredible urban renaissance, Boston making itself into one of the most vital and dynamic cities, not only in the country, but in the world. It's just absolutely amazing. Now, we have daunting problems that we have to face, but I'll take those problems next to the ones we had back when the whole idea of cities was in question. The basic battle for the city has been won, and a lot of people in this room were part of that battle, and that is an enormous, enormous triumph for our civilization. But it is not the time for complacence or self-congratulation, obviously. We need only think of Boston and Detroit. In the 60s, when I was in high school, Boston was in free fall. Detroit, the wealthiest city in America on a per capita basis, and we see what's happened in the space of less than a generation. So we have to be vigilant, we have to safeguard the gains that have been won, and we have to be smart about taking on the next set of challenges. And we have to have new determination to take on the tough ones. The opportunity gap, the lack of affordable housing, the schools that still don't work, the transportation system that's an embarrassment to a world-class city. There's plenty to do. So let us be the laboratories of democracy that Louis Brandeis talked about for the states, but at the city level, because it's clear that the initiative and imagination attacking these problems is going to start out as local initiatives, and just as many things have before in our history. And Boston has to be one of the places of maximum innovation with the toughest problems we face. Now, we will pledge to you, our promise is to bring all our capacities, the research we commission, the grants we make, the forums we host, the partnerships with donors we fashion, the public policy options we define, the alliances we forge, bring all of those tools to this next chapter in the life of this great city that we're so privileged to reside in. A long time ago, the president of the University of Chicago, Robert Hutchins, said, "It may take 10 years or 100 to get the civilization, to build the civilization we want. All the more reason to get started this afternoon." Well, we've made more than a start already in building, as I said, one of the most dynamic and vital cities in the world. Now, let's see what can be done, not only to preserve and enhance that fundamental achievement, but to extend its benefits much more widely in accord with our fundamental values. Let's resolve to make Boston the opportunity capital of the nation. Will you join us? If we can fix that one, that would justify another gala. Again, thank you so much for having me and for being part of this wonderful evening. It is now my pleasure to bring back to the stage Gerald Chertavian and Ray Hammond for a part of the program that I think you will find a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
You know, Paul, before you sit down, I think on behalf of everyone in this room, we owe you a huge, huge round of sincere applause. Mary Jo mentioned earlier that the Boston